It's great to welcome back to the show Professor Emeritus of Economics at my alma mater, the University of Massachusetts, economist Richard Wolff. Professor Wolff, we've been talking extensively about the Panama Papers, which are this set of over 11 million leaked documents from the firm Mossack Fonseca in Panama. And what I want to start with you is, what is your sense of the really big story here? Some saying the big story are the particulars of David Cameron, while others are saying that's a distraction. The big story has been how African countries have been raped and pillaged. Others saying the real story is that so much of what was leaked is actually legal. What's your sense of the focus here?
Actually, I would pick a different item as the basic focus. I think what the Mossack Fonseca law firm's revealed files show us is yet another glimpse, not that we really need it, but another glimpse into the vast mechanisms that exist in a world capitalist system to do two things. Number one, to hide your wealth, and number two, to evade paying taxes on your wealth and your income by means of hiding it, so that we deprive countless societies of the revenue from taxing wealth and corporate activity that could make the lives literally of the entire planet much, much better than it now is, because of the hiding and the tax evasion that firms like Mossack Fonseca specialize in allowing to happen.
And is it important in your mind to distinguish, you use the word evade taxes, and typically we talk about tax evasion, which is not legal, and we talk about tax avoidance, which is using legal means. Maybe they are incredibly plutocratic means or immoral means, but legal means to reduce one's tax liability. The Panama Papers exposed both. Is this a relevant distinction, practically speaking?
Well, for the world as a whole, I don't think so. I think the way I see it is as follows. Large corporations and wealthy individuals have tried very hard and with considerable success to either write the kinds of laws or to amend the kinds of laws they want and need to either hide their wealth or minimize their taxes. They have also shown us through countless examples that if and when they cannot get the laws to do for them what they want, they are perfectly prepared to work out illegal or extra legal mechanisms toward the exact same end. The reason, for example, Panama is the place that got exposed is because Panama is one of the places in the world that makes a little extra money by pandering to this very process. They've written their laws in such a way as to make it attractive for companies, shell companies they're called, to be formed there. And likewise, they have enabled their clients of these law firms, for example, to move in and out of Panama very easily, and therefore to hide their wealth relatively without difficulty. And so they're in competition with the dozens of other countries that do the same thing in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Asia, and so on. So I am not persuaded that the line between legal and extra legal is terribly meaningful in terms of what the economics of all of this amounts to.
We learned, to the extent that maybe we weren't completely convinced of it already, and many of us were, we learned about the incredible size of this apparatus for tax avoidance slash evasion and the shell companies, et cetera, through these leaks. Given that this apparatus is so extensive, there's really no one single point. I mean, as you said, if it's not Panama, there are other countries in the Caribbean that are facilitating these types of mechanisms. We also saw that there were individuals from countless states across most continents that were taking advantage of these mechanisms. Should the focus be on changing the laws around what makes this possible, or should the focus be to expose it and make it politically unpalatable so that it will have consequences? What might be most effective?
Well, I think both of the things you just mentioned would be steps in the right direction. It's hard for me to see how this is going to work the way the world is organized today, since however effective we are in one country, at least for a while, to take steps to make that kind of behavior harder, there are so many other countries that will jump in to take advantage of the process that what we'll see is money moving, as it did, for example, in recent years from Switzerland, which got a bit of a black eye a few years ago from the European Union. So money left Switzerland and went, for example, to Panama. There's now money leaving Panama and Switzerland and going to places like Wyoming and Nevada and Delaware in the United States, because they have very lax laws about figuring out who owns what, etc. So it's hard to see this as solving the problem, and I'd be fearful for the same reasons about political exposure. I guess what I'm leading up to is the following. Rather than try to hem in the abuse that wealthy people and huge corporations make of our tax system by the mechanisms of evasion, legal and illegal, that they sponsor and they impose, why don't we go to the root of the problem? We should not have huge concentrations of wealth, either in the hands of individuals or in the hands of particular corporations. Once we allow that, once we have a system that allows such inequality and then tries to have the government to come in and offset it a little bit, we are building in enormous incentives for the very tax avoidance and tax evasion that this system now displays to us. I would go to the root of the problem and talk about ways of changing fundamentally the inequality that breeds all of this.
Right, and that's quite high level, right? I mean, if you are taking the approach that that's the level where changes need to be made, you're basically saying this is not about limiting any particular corporation's ability or rights to manage these levels of money, and you would find probably opposition to those limits on both the left and the right for different reasons and in different ways. You're sort of setting the bar quite high. Is there not some intermediate area that could be attacked, at least in the short or medium term? Because as you've said before, the level of change that would make it impossible or more difficult to reduce the level of inequality may be far away, admittedly.
Well, I think my answer would be the following. I believe in reform. Reform the laws, reform the political exposure, as you put it earlier. Try this reform, try that reform, try the little steps, the medium steps. But if you discover that realistically, every time you do that, an escape mechanism is found. Every time you impose a new law, the very people that helped you write the law are then hired away by the objects of the law to help them escape the whole point and purpose of the law. Then at a certain point, it is no longer realistic to favor reform. Then you have to go to the higher bar, not because you would prefer it, not because you wouldn't rather have the small steps work, but because you recognize, rather than be self-deluded, that the small steps have all been tried, have all been evaded, avoided, amended, circumvented. At this point, you throw in the towel, and by virtue of your realism, you become someone who's much more interested in fundamental systemic change, because anything short of that has basically shown it is not enough to solve the problem.
In the U.S., sometimes it can be blinding to look at differences between Republicans and Democrats, or liberals and conservatives. And as we've said, there are issues on which the dominant American political parties are quite different, and there are issues where they are almost indistinguishable. One of the things that has been illuminated for me by the Panama Papers are how, by and large, on these issues of plutocracy and wealth inequality and income inequality and everything that these leaks have dealt with, we see a sort of partnership, or at least a shared indifference or interested in using these mechanisms from left and right around the world, have we not?
I think so. I think that the conventional left and right are, as a result of the very thing you've said, in very deep trouble. That the mass support for the status quo, whether it's center left or center right, is everywhere disappearing. It disappeared first in Greece in 2012. It disappeared in Portugal in 2015. It seems to me to be in the process of eroding seriously here in the United States. Mr. Cameron and Mr. Corbyn are light years apart in a way that Labour and the Conservatives haven't been in a long time in England. And I could go on and on and on. The so-called middle isn't holding and is giving way to the extremes. And that's not because the extremes are bad. It's because the middle is no longer tolerable for a growing portion of the population, precisely because of how, as you put it, what it has allowed to exist and what was revealed so dramatically in those Panama Papers.
What do you think will be the biggest consequence of these leaks, either as a sort of principle or even specifically, if you want to get into that?
Well, I think as a principle, you're going to see one politician after another caught in the limelight, one corporation or another caught in the limelight, and so on, basically doing what they have done now for years. This is not the first exposure. The Swiss went through a few years ago a whistleblower very high up in the Swiss financial circles who exposed what they were doing there, particularly with Americans escaping taxes here in the United States. And there have been other exposures before. The people involved wait for the media attention to fade, for the headlines to be out of fashion, and then they can go and muddy the water and pay their usual political flunkies to look the other way or to pass legislation that doesn't fundamentally deal with it. They're hoping to continue to do what they have done in each past case with this new exposure, try to make it a little more difficult for the next whistleblower or computer hacker to do his or her job. And continue. And that's why the middle is collapsing, because the mass of people are not anymore as easily brought along to join in this looking the other way, because their ox is being gored too. We're in a system in which more and more people feel they're getting the short end of the stick. And this kind of exposure simply drives that point deeper into their consciousness. When exactly all this will blow, I don't know. No one does. But I think you're seeing the signs of it with Trump's support on the right in this country, Mr. Sanders' support on the left in this country, and the growing calls of almost a clear majority now that the representatives of the middle are really the ones that are distrusted and in many cases really beginning to be hated for their being the ones who preside over nothing changes ever, and that's simply no longer tolerable.
Yeah, no doubt that this will be a great opportunity for elected officials around the world to talk about the legislation they introduced and sort of leaving it there without having to explain where else it went. Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of Massachusetts, economist Richard Wolff, always great to have you on.
Thank you, David. I look forward to our next talk.